Thank you very much. Thank you. Everyone hear me? Hear me back? Great. Thank you for having me today. It's great to be here. Dan's kind of spoiled my first slide. So can anyone raise your hand if you know what the link is between all of these different companies? These are all companies. Yes, yes. Anyone else? There's two links. The first is these companies are just some of the ones that have been hacked in the last 18 months or so. But they've all been hacked, we think, by teenagers. That is the shocking truth of the situation we're in with cybercrime at the moment. There is a resurgence taking place in teenage cybercrime, which began this year, the same year that I bring my book out about teenage cybercrime. It's not my fault. People have said the timing is suspicious, but nothing to do with me. So it's also a real wake-up call, I think, this year for people, especially in the UK, who see M&S, Co-op, empty shelves, Percy pigs can't be bought in shops, terrifying situation, JLR, huge, enormous economic consequences of this hack, which we think has been carried out potentially by the same group as M&S and Co-op. That's what they told me. We don't know. And Dan said there have been arrests. No charges yet, though. Crucially, no charges. And I think the police are under a lot of pressure, obviously, to make some arrests with the public outcry. There have been 7 arrests so far this year, in the UK alone, of teenagers, 17, 18, 19, linked to these hacks. And I know because I'm speaking to them, there are still more at large. And people are asking me right now, what is going on? Why are there so many hacks? Why are they having so much impact on everyday life? And the answer I have is because you've got the steady drumbeat of what is like 90% of cybercrime, Russian-speaking cybercrime, which carries on as it has done the last 5 years or so. But then you've got this teenage hacking cycle come round again. And that's why we're seeing such an upswell. And then, of course, they are just such high-profile hacks, aren't they? They are household names with real, visible consequences. So often in cyber, there is no visible consequence because it's all ones and zeros, isn't it? Whereas with these hacks, you can actually see the damage being done. And the other question people are asking me is, why teenagers? This is so scary. What's happening to our teenagers? And I say, well, I'm sorry, that's not new either, because we have seen cycles of teenage cybercriminal gangs at least the last 10 years. So the other question, which I've been trying to answer in my book and then in my talks and various articles, is how can we stop the cycle of teenagers? How can we stop teenage boys going from being gaming obsessed, usually, into online delinquency, and then sometimes into very serious cybercriminals? And I don't think anyone epitomizes this pathway better than this man here. This is Julius Kivimaki, who has just been released from prison, controversially, this is his wanted poster. So he carried out what I would argue is the cruelest cyber attack in history. He hacked a chain of psychotherapy centers in Finland called Vastamo. And they were doing some incredible work. They were helping people with psychotherapists and psychiatrists. And he found a way late one night to get into the database for Vastamo. And he stole all the usual things we talk about all the time. So social security numbers, phone numbers, email addresses, real addresses, that kind of stuff. But he also very cruelly stole the patient notes. So what the psychiatrists are writing in the sessions. We talk about data breaches all the time. I report on them all the time. It's hard to grasp what impact they have. People often say to me, so what? But I can't think of a worse data set than my therapy notes being in the hands of someone like him. So that's pretty cruel. But what he did next was even crueler. So he tried to get money for his hack. So he went to the CEO of Vastamo and tried to get 400,000 euros. Pay me or I'll release the data. They wouldn't pay. So then he took the step further, which it's so rare in cybercrime, luckily. Sadly, it's becoming more common, but it is still rare. He emailed the patients directly. So he found 27,000 emails, and he sent these poor people, vulnerable people, an email saying, I have your notes, pay me 500 euros in Bitcoin, or I'll publish them on the darknet. What they didn't know is he'd already started doing that. He published 100 a day for 3 days. And then he made, I'm full of hyperbole, sorry about this, it's true though, probably the biggest blunder in cybercrime history. I won't go into what it is, but he completely cocked it up. And that's what led him to do the emails, because he was desperate, trying to make some money. He was convicted and put in prison, but this, of course, wasn't his first rodeo. This is the climax of a 10-year cybercrime spree, which started, as you can imagine, when he was a teenager. Here he is, Ryan, calling himself Ryan at the time. That was one of his aliases. He was also called himself Z-Kill as well. And I would argue that this is the start of when he really became an infamous and notorious cybercriminal, probably the most hated hacker in history, if you combine the Vistamo with what I'm about to say about other things he did. And there's a challenge for anyone in this audience who've been in cyber probably way longer than me. Is there anyone else who should be given that label, the most hated hacker in history? Because if there is, please let me know. Genuinely interested. I'll have to change the book, but that's fine. We can change it in the reprint. So I'll ask you at the end. So this was 2014. He was 17. I was working at Sky News at the time. I had no idea what cyber was. I was a normal kind of crime, home affairs correspondent. And I came in the betwixtmas between Christmas and New Year's. And I was sort of, hungover and tired. And I'd expected a pretty easy day. And my boss came up to me and said, "Have you heard about this Lizard Squad hack?" I said, "No, what are you talking about?" And he said, "It's massive. It's everywhere. It's global news. This gang has managed to take down PlayStation Live and Xbox One, the two biggest gaming platforms in the world. So no one at Christmas Eve, Christmas Day could play their games, download new games, register new consoles, play with their mates. About 150 million people affected by this." And they said, and he came up to me, the editor, Paul Harrison, and he said, "Riley's called," the head of Sky News. "He wants a lizard on air tonight." I was like, how on earth am I going to get one of these anonymous hackers from this Lizard Squad gang to talk to me? I managed to get Kivamaki, and I think that's one of the first lessons in these teen cybercrime gangs. They love attention. They're not like the standard Russian-speaking cybercriminal gangs. They love attention. And he came on Sky News, and we did this interview, and it blew my mind completely. The arrogance of him, I couldn't believe it. The power that him and his kid friends could wield from keyboard and mouse. I just couldn't understand. That is why I'm here, because of that interview, because I just became obsessed with cyber ever since. And of course, he didn't do it alone, because this is the logo for Lizard Squad. Hands up if you recognize that logo. Oh, brilliant, yeah. So these guys were a big deal in 2014 into 15 because of that Christmas Day hack. They were called the Grinches of Christmas, but they did lots of other things as well. They had about a year-long cybercrime spree where they went after lots of gaming companies with DDoS attacks and stuff like that. One of the things that always springs to mind, one of the things that I remember with them is a pretty sick joke, which will again give us another lesson in the type of criminals these guys are. They hacked the Malaysia Airlines website and defaced it. So instead of 404 page not found, they put 404 plane not found, which is obviously a very sick joke about the MH370 disaster, which was around that time as well. So Lizard Squad, if you look up famous hacking groups, Google it, Lizard Squad will probably be in there as one of the most infamous. But they weren't alone at this period of time. They were part of this conveyor belt of different gangs in the 2010s, where there was this upswell in teenage hacking culture, the likes of which we hadn't seen, and it probably hadn't seen until this year, pretty much. And there were lots of different gangs. So, for example, I'm not making the names up. This is generally what they call themselves. HTP, Hack the Planet. Everyone knows the film, Hackers, at the end where it goes, "Hack the Planet." And that's where they got their name from. ISIS gang as well. These were kids who were trying to scare people into thinking they were like a cyber caliphate type thing. Do you remember the ISIS, that terrible, terrifying period of time where ISIS was marching through Syria and in the news every day, and these guys thought, let's call ourselves ISIS gang to really scare the public. Then there was Team Crucifix or Die. Don't know why. UG Nazi was another one. So there was all these gangs coming around and doing stuff, and it was taking people by surprise. And a lot of the cybersecurity companies and researchers are kind of ignoring them because it's like, it's just kids mucking around. Who cares? Let's worry about the big problems in cyber, the North Koreans, the Russians, the Chinese. No one wanted to admit that they were being hacked by kids. Everyone wants to say it was Putin or Xi. But there was one researcher called Alison Nixon, who is still the absolute expert in the world on teen cybercrime gangs, and she was paying attention. And she came up with a term with her colleague to describe these kind of gangs. She called them NPTs, which stands for Noob Persistent Threat, which of course is a joke on Advanced Persistent Threat. But APTs, obviously everyone knows APTs, they are the creme de la creme of cyber gangs. They are the, the Fancy Bears from Russia, Cozy Bear, the Lazarus Group from North Korea, whatever we call ourselves in the UK. Yes, we will have APTs hacking as well, and the US, of course. What other ones are there? Salt Typhoon. These are the APTs that everyone wants to concentrate on. But Alison said, no. NPTs should be taken seriously. They are newbies, so noob, so they're learning on the job. They don't have many skills, but they are persistent and they are a threat. And she's been banging that drum for 10 years now. And I'm banging that drum as well, along with her. The other name that keeps coming up as well, if you don't like NPTs, is Advanced Persistent Teens, which is also quite funny. So there are people that she was paying attention, and then now we are starting to see a bit more attention being paid to it. But where did the NPTs come from? Where did the Advanced Persistent Teens come from? I would argue from these guys. Who recognizes that logo? Yes. Oh, you guys are great. I do these every now and then, and people are like, oh, but you actually know. So this is LulzSec, and LulzSec are, I would argue, they started this whole wave of NPT activity. They were a gang of English-speaking hackers from the UK, the US, and Ireland, and they came to prominence in 2011. And they had about a month of insane hacking. They went after everybody. They hacked. They stole 70,000 customer records from Fox, for example, because someone on Fox said something about a rapper that wasn't very nice, and they liked that rapper. They hacked into news sites and faked news stories. So they put one about Tupac being alive and well, living on an island in New Zealand, which is quite funny. But they also did one where they hacked the Sun's website and said that Rupert Murdoch had died. Not funny. And LulzSec came out of Anonymous. Everyone knows Anonymous. The very serious guys with the Guy Fawkes masks, going after kind of corruption and scandal. Very earnest group. And in the kind of 2009s, they showed what can be done if you come together using social media, rally around a cause, and go after companies and corruption. And these guys from LulzSec were part of Anonymous, and they said, that sounds fun, but let's do it our own way. So instead of the Anonymous tagline and very serious logo, LulzSec went for that. And Anonymous has a tagline which I think is, we do not forgive, we do not forget, expect us. Whereas LulzSec chose, this is the internet, where we screw each other over for a jolt of satisfaction. So that gives you an idea of what these guys were about. And they were all arrested. They didn't last long, because one thing about NPTs is they have terrible operational security. They like to brag. They like to talk about all the money they've got and the Bitcoin. They like to show that in their communities, and these guys were all over Twitter. So they were eventually rounded up. Didn't last long. And what's interesting about them is that there was this. Afterwards, there was one of the guys was in the UK called Jake Davies. He was arrested. He served time in Felton Prison, which is an absolutely horrendous youth offenders prison in the UK. And he came out and he did an interview on Newsnight where he said, please, kids, do not get involved in hacking. It is a cynical world. It will ruin your life. And, don't do it. But it was on Newsnight. What? So none of these kids are watching Newsnight. It was also because of the slow wheels of justice, years after the event. By that time, Lizard Squad had come up, HTP, all the other gangs had come up. So it's one of the problems we have is these role models that can actually have a really important voice are ignored, or it just takes too long for their voices to get heard. So LulzSec, I would argue, nudged teenage hacking culture into this direction. Before LulzSec, it was different. And you might be thinking, hang on a minute, Joe, this is nonsense. Teenagers have always been hacking. Hacking has always been dodgy. What are you saying? I would say yes, but if you look back to the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, the kinds of gangs, teenage gangs that were operating, Legion of Doom, Chaos Computer Club, Cult of the Dead Cow, Loft, they were, in a sort of similar way to Anonymous, about exposing scandal, corruption, but more importantly, embarrassing big technology companies for bad code and bad privacy practices, really kind of making the internet a better place. These guys, the MPTs of back then and today, they don't care about that at all. At all. And what was fascinating to me, a friend of mine is an author, Jeff White. He's a really good author. If you're into cyber books, you should read some of his after you've read mine. He gave me some advice when I was writing my book. He said, you need to have a period of gathering and a period of writing. And you can't merge the two, otherwise you'll never write, because that's the fun bit. The gathering, the stuff, and the interviews is the fun bit. It's the writing that becomes hard. I tried that, didn't work, and I fell down a rabbit hole late one night, and I found, I'm so glad I did, I found an interview, a kind of like debate between the very controversial internet figure Kim.com and Julius Kivamaki, Z-Kill Ryan. And it was after the Christmas Day hacks, and Kim.com was saying, you guys are ruining hacking, you're giving hacking a bad name. Hackers used to be good, used to be moralistic, used to make the internet a better place. What are you doing? You're just mucking around and causing problems for everyone. And Kivamaki just laughed. And he said, hacking has changed. It's a completely different meaning now. You can't compare us to the old cats, is what he said, which I just thought was absolutely brilliant. Straight in the book. So the publisher did my first draft, handed it in. They were very happy, but they said, can you take your boring BBC News hat off, your boring Sky News hat off, put your neck on the line a little bit, tell us, you've told us when the shift happened and how it happened, but you haven't told us why it happened. And I thought, okay, I'll try. And I landed on 3 different potential theories as to why we are where we are. Number 1 is Twitter. So 2009, 10, 11, Twitter starts becoming a thing. Before Twitter, when you were on a social network, you were being social with your network. And Twitter came along and they said, hey, you don't need friends, you need followers. You need retweets and likes and things like that. You need fame, infamy, not friends. And that had a massive impact on these types of teenagers. They saw, these guys got 300,000 followers in about 3 weeks. And the other gangs, they wanted that as well. Number 2, the rise of live text and voice chat and video calls. So if you look at the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, it was bulletin boards, really boring. Like they would go in on there and they would say, hey, I've done something cool. Wait 3 days for a reply, or meet up in person. Live chat online changed everything. Cybercrime is a team sport. And if you can build those relationships quickly using voice call, video call, then that's really what propelled this to where it is today. And I've sat and I've listened to hours of these inane Skype chats with these kids. And they don't ever turn their mics off. This is how they live now, completely online, on Discord, on Telegram. Third one, Bitcoin. Obvious. How do you make money before Bitcoin if you did a data breach? Very difficult. So every group since LulzSec in this culture, and there are some good apples out there, but there are far more bad ones. They're less interested in making the internet a better place and more interested in fame and money. And that brings us to where we are today with the com and people like this. So this guy is Aryan Kurtaj, who was part of a gang called Lapsus. Anyone know Lapsus? They were the big boogeyman of cyber in 2022, 23. He is now convicted in a very, very sort of strange court case. I was there for the BBC, and they didn't convict on guilt because he's got severe autism. So they had to the jury had to decide, did he do it, but not if he's criminally guilty. Anyway, he's serving an indefinite hospital order at the moment. So these guys from Lapsus, they are part of the com, which is this larger online community, very kind of loose collective of teenagers doing bad things online. And every now and then you get a gang like Lapsus who comes to the fore, who have got a bit more skill, a bit more determination, and they go on a wave of attacks, like we are seeing right now with Scattered Spider. So Aryan Kurtaj, he hacked NVIDIA, BT, Okta, Uber, Revolut, and most famously GTA 6, the makers of Grand Theft Auto. The game comes out next year. It will be the biggest entertainment product of all time, without a doubt. And he managed to get into the servers and steal unfinished clips from the computer game and then try to get money from Rockstar. It cost them $5 million to try and repair the damage he'd done. Fascinating thing about him, utterly addicted to cybercrime. They couldn't stop him, arrested him once, took all his devices away, carried on. Searched his house again, took all the devices away, carried on. Put him in a hotel in Bicester. If you know the UK, if you know Bicester, that's crime, that's like a punishment in itself. And they said, right, he'll be safe there, he's got no devices. But then they saw news of another attack, and they were like, oh no, it's Aryan again. So the police had to find a way to catch him in the act. So they hid outside of his hotel room, waited till they saw his username that they thought was him pop up on the Lapsus Telegram group. Bingo, swipe the card in. Aryan's found on the bed with a mobile phone. Bingo, break of bail conditions, internet-connected device. But then thought, hang on a minute, how has he actually been carrying out these hacks? Like, I can't on a phone. So then they went and they had a look at the back of the hotel TV, and there was an Amazon Fire Stick in the back of the TV, and a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse. And that was how he carried on. Absolutely incredible. There was another kid as well, 17-year-old, who was part of that same trial that was also convicted. So the thing about Lapsus, and what we're seeing now with Scattered Spider, is that they are becoming more professionalized, and they're joining up with very professional cybercrime gangs, like ransomware gangs, Russian-speaking gangs. And the co-op hackers, they sent me this. This is, you can see what it is. Dragon Force is the ransomware that they were using, the ransomware. They were an affiliate of that ransomware group called Dragon Force. And what was fascinating to me, they sent this to me, I think no one else, because I don't know, I haven't seen it anywhere else when I was talking to them, when they told me the same thing about what Dan said about yanking the plug, really enjoying themselves. You don't get this from other ransomware groups. They're having a good time. They've taken the time going into AI to make that. And what I found fascinating, a few weeks ago, I saw this one on the Dragon Force website as well. And if you look at the entire kind of like graveyard of companies that have been hacked by Dragon Force, you don't see that. So what I found fascinating is it's that attention seeking. They cannot help themselves. They go the extra mile where other more money interested gangs, they won't go there. They won't spend time on that. They want quick money and move on. But these NPTs, they love the attention, they love the chaos. Also reminded me of the film Home Alone. You know, like the wet bandits, whenever they do a crime, they make a flood in the house that they burgled. It's like they can't help themselves. That's their calling card. So you might be thinking, who's to blame here? But I think it's very easy to blame the parents. And I don't know the answers to this. I tried to answer in the last chapter, spoke to lots of different experts. But some people, and there'll be people in here that say, it's the parents' fault. And I think that's potentially true. But there was something that happened to me recently that just really made me think again about that. I was in court for a recent hearing where one teenager got remanded in custody for hacking. And I was also in court for when he got a suspended sentence a few years before for hacking. And I saw the mum, and I remembered the mum from a few years ago, and she was in tears of joy when her son got a suspended sentence because he'd been let off. Here she was again a few years later. She was on the floor, screaming, crying, inconsolable, because her son had put her through this again. And I just felt such a swell of sympathy for this poor woman who just cannot keep up with what her son is doing in his bedroom. So I don't know the answer. And it's a very, very difficult question. But before I finish, you might be thinking, hacking teenagers, yeah, it's been a bad year. But I went through the index of my book the other day, just out of interest, really, to see how many different companies I talk about that have been hacked by teenagers. It's quite a few. And they're big names as well. So I think it's fair to say teenage cybercrime is not a niche issue anymore. And we should take it seriously, not only because we're trying to protect networks, but also we're trying to protect kids as well. And people like Aaron Kurtage, they won't have a future. And I think it's up to us to try and find a way to stop the cycle. Thank you.